The idea that some U.S. states might be addicted to struggle is a provocative metaphor, but one that gains considerable weight when observing the persistent multi-generational challenges that plague certain regions. This isn't about a conscious desire for hardship, but rather a deeply entrenched set of economic, social, and political conditions that seem to perpetuate cycles of underperformance, making genuine progress elusive. Like any addiction, it's characterized by a harmful pattern of behavior that's difficult to break, even when the negative consequences are clear. Defining the struggle, more than just economic woes. To understand this concept, we first need to define what struggle looks like at the state level. It's far more nuanced than simply having a low GDP. While economic indicators are crucial, a holistic view encompasses a broader spectrum of interconnected issues. Economic stagnation. This includes persistently high unemployment rates, low median household incomes, high poverty rates, and a lack of economic diversification. States heavily reliant on declining industries like manufacturing or resource extraction often fall into this trap. A low GDP per capita is a common symptom, reflecting limited economic output per person. Human capital flight, the brain drain phenomenon, where educated and skilled individuals leave for better opportunities elsewhere, is a hallmark of struggling states. This depletes the very human capital needed for innovation and growth, creating a vicious cycle. Poor social indicators, low educational attainment, high rates of chronic diseases including obesity and diabetes, shorter life expectancies, and significant public health crises, like the opioid epidemic, are all indicators of deep-seated societal problems. These issues not only reduce quality of life, but also severely limit workforce productivity. Inadequate infrastructure, crumbling roads, outdated public transportation, limited broadband access, and aging utilities hinder economic development and quality of life. Without modern infrastructure, it's difficult to attract new businesses or support existing ones. Fiscal instability. States facing chronic struggle often grapple with significant budget deficits, underfunded pension systems, and an inability to invest adequately in critical public services. This can lead to a reliance on regressive taxation or cuts to essential programs, further exacerbating social problems. Historical legacies, the roots of the struggle. The addiction often has deep historical roots. Many struggling states are products of specific economic eras that have long passed, leaving behind challenging legacies. Deindustrialization. States in the Rust Belt, e.g., Michigan, Ohio, Pennsylvania, were once manufacturing powerhouses. As industries like steel and automotive declined, these regions faced massive job losses, population exodus, and the decay of once vibrant industrial centers. While some have made strides, the scars of deindustrialization run deep, manifested in generational unemployment and social fragmentation. Resource extraction economies. States heavily dependent on coal, e.g., West Virginia, Kentucky, or timber, have experienced similar declines as these industries mechanize or become less economically viable. The boom and bust cycles inherent in these industries historically prevented the development of diversified economies, leaving communities vulnerable when the primary resource waned. The lack of investment in alternative industries or education during prosperous times contributed to this vulnerability. Plantation economies and racial inequality. In parts of the Deep South, e.g., Mississippi, Louisiana, Alabama, the legacy of slavery and Jim Crow laws continues to cast a long shadow. Historically, these economies relied on cheap labor, which inhibited the development of a broad middle class and widespread educational opportunities. Persistent racial disparities in wealth, education, and health outcomes in these states are a direct consequence of these historical injustices, making it harder to build a truly equitable and prosperous society. Geographic isolation. Some states or regions within states, due to their remote location or difficult terrain, have historically struggled to connect to larger economic networks. This isolation can limit access to markets, capital, and skilled labor, making economic diversification particularly challenging. Economic structures, the self-perpetuating cycle. The economic structures in struggling states often create a self-perpetuating cycle, mirroring the patterns of addiction where initial causes lead to ongoing dependency. Lack of diversification. A key characteristic is an economy concentrated in a few, often declining sectors. This lack of diversification makes states highly vulnerable to economic shocks. When the primary industry falters, there are few alternative opportunities, leading to mass unemployment and economic despair. The path dependency of these states, sticking to what they know, even if it's failing, makes it hard to pivot. Low skill, low wage trap. The absence of high growth, high wage industries can trap a state in a cycle of low skill, low wage jobs. This limits upward mobility, reduces tax revenues, and discourages investment in education and innovation. Without the demand for skilled labor, there's less incentive for residents to pursue higher education or specialized training. Limited entrepreneurship and innovation. Struggling states often lack vibrant entrepreneurial ecosystems. There may be a scarcity of venture capital, mentorship, and support networks for startups. Without new business creation, economic dynamism wanes, and the potential for new job growth remains untapped. The brightest minds may leave to pursue opportunities elsewhere. Capital flight. As economic opportunities diminish, businesses and investors may withdraw capital, further starving the state of the resources needed for growth. This often manifests as corporations relocating headquarters or operations, and a reluctance of new companies to invest. Political and policy impediments. The reluctance to change. Just as an addict might resist treatment, political and policy landscapes in some struggling states can hinder genuine reform. Political polarization and gridlock. Deep ideological divisions can prevent bipartisan cooperation on long-term solutions. Debates over critical issues like education funding, infrastructure spending, or healthcare often become bogged down in partisan rhetoric, preventing the decisive action needed for meaningful change. Short-termism. Political cycles often incentivize short-term fixes rather than sustained, transformative investments. Politicians may prioritize immediate, visible projects or tax cuts over difficult but necessary reforms that might not yield results within a single election cycle. This can lead to a failure to address root causes, perpetuating the struggle. Resistance to change. Powerful vested interests, entrenched bureaucracies, or a general societal aversion to change can block necessary reforms. Efforts to diversify economies, reform educational systems, or modernize infrastructure might face resistance from those who benefit from the status quo or fear disruption. Inadequate investment in public goods. Some states consistently underinvest in crucial public services like education, public health, and infrastructure. This can be due to fiscal constraints, anti-tax sentiments, or a lack of political will. Without these foundational investments, it's incredibly difficult to build a competitive economy or a healthy, skilled workforce. For example, states with consistently low per-pupil spending in education often correlate with lower academic outcomes and a less prepared future workforce. Race to the bottom mentality. In an attempt to attract businesses, some states engage in a race to the bottom by offering significant tax incentives, weakening environmental regulations, or suppressing wages. While this might attract some businesses, it can erode the state's tax base, degrade its environment, and further depress living standards for its residents, perpetuating the cycle of struggle. Social and cultural dynamics. The psychological parallels. The addiction to struggle metaphor resonates strongly when examining the social and cultural dynamics at play, mirroring psychological aspects of addiction. Generational poverty. Poverty, when deeply embedded, can become generational. Children born into poverty often face limited opportunities, poorer health outcomes, and reduced access to quality education, making it exceedingly difficult to break free from the cycle. This creates a kind of societal inertia. Brain drain and loss of hope. The continuous outmigration of talented individuals can lead to a loss of hope and a sense of defeat within the remaining population. When the most ambitious and skilled leave, it can further diminish the capacity for innovation and community leadership. This creates a self-fulfilling prophecy of decline. Erosion of social capital. In communities facing chronic struggle, social capital, the networks of relationships among people who live and work in a particular society, enabling that society to function effectively, can erode. This manifests as declining civic engagement, distrust in institutions, and a weakening of community bonds, making collective action for change more difficult. Normalization of struggle. When hardship becomes the norm for generations, there's a risk that struggle itself becomes normalized. Expectations might be lowered, and the perceived effort required to change things can seem insurmountable, leading to apathy or a learned helplessness. Identity tied to past glory. For some states, particularly those with strong industrial or resource based histories, their identity can be so entwined with past glories that adapting to a new economic reality becomes a challenge. There can be a reluctance to let go of old ways of life, even if they are no longer sustainable, hindering the embrace of necessary change. Breaking the cycle, a path to recovery. Just as overcoming an addiction requires a multifaceted approach, so too does a state's path to recovery from chronic struggle. There's no single magic bullet, but rather a combination of sustained strategic efforts. Investing in human capital. This is paramount. It means comprehensive education reform from early childhood to higher education, workforce development programs tailored to future industries, and lifelong learning initiatives. States must focus on equipping their residents with the skills demanded by a 21st century economy. Economic diversification, actively cultivating new industries, supporting startups, and attracting investment in high-growth sectors is crucial. This involves creating favorable business environments, investing in research and development, and fostering innovation hubs. Infrastructure modernization. Significant investment in modern infrastructure, broadband internet, updated transportation networks, and clean energy solutions is essential to connect states to the global economy and improve residents' quality of life. Targeted social interventions, addressing generational poverty, public health crises, and other social determinants of health requires targeted, evidence-based programs. This includes improving access to healthcare, affordable housing, and social safety nets. Strong visionary leadership. Political leaders who can transcend partisan divides, articulate a long-term vision, and mobilize resources for transformative change are vital. This also involves fostering a culture of civic engagement and collaboration among diverse stakeholders. Regional collaboration. Often, a single state's struggle is mirrored in its neighboring regions. Collaborative efforts across state lines or within multi-state economic zones can leverage collective strengths and address shared challenges more effectively. Embracing innovation and adaptability. Perhaps most importantly, states must cultivate a culture of innovation and adaptability, where change is viewed not as a threat but as an opportunity. This involves fostering a willingness to experiment, learn from failures, and continuously evolve. The metaphor of a state being addicted to struggle is a powerful way to frame the complex and persistent challenges faced by certain U.S. regions. It highlights not just economic deficiencies, but also the deep historical, political, social, and cultural factors that can create a self-reinforcing cycle of underperformance. Breaking free from this cycle requires more than just economic policy. It demands a fundamental shift in mindset, a sustained commitment to comprehensive reform, and courageous leadership willing to confront uncomfortable truths for the sake of a more prosperous and equitable future. It's a long and arduous recovery process, but one that is ultimately achievable with dedication and a clear vision.